Okay. Let's go. And Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Tet Amud. Last we got together last week, we were talking about the idea that there's a question about why it would be that if you sent the Shlichim away out on the month of Elul, why you would do it again at the beginning of Tishrei. That was our discussion last week. Yeah. And we spoke specifically about the fact that it's 2 months, one after the other, and why do you need both? Like if you already know that Elul is already always going to be 29 days, so why do you need the shlichim to go out also for Rosh Hashanah? It have to be basically on Rosh Hashanah on Aleph Tishrei, maybe the day after, maybe Bet Tishrei. And we talked about the idea that we want to at least be able to fix things up for the other Yom Tovim in case it really was off. And the Gemara had pointed out, well, that didn't happen from the days of Ezra. What we saw last time, remember, we took a whole off ramp to go see the source in Sefer Nehemiah. Paradoxically called Nehemiah, but that's where Ezra appears. Seventh parak is what we learned, seventh and eighth, where the people in Yerushalayim are learning on Rosh Hashanah. Seems to be a 2-day affair. We had that whole discussion. We saw in Tosfot. Remember, that was the Tosfot actually on the top of the page. And the idea here that the Gemara had come to in the end was, well, it's true, it might turn out that people did Rosh Hashanah on the wrong day, but at least they'll get the other Yom Tovim on the correct day. Yom Kippur, not Yom Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur and Sukkot will be on the correct day. Also, I mentioned last we learned, the Gemara is assuming Rosh Hashanah is a 1-day affair. It's before the Takana that it's a 2-day Kavua, right? That once the calendar is set, and for other reasons, we already know basically when things are going to be happening. Yeah. In order to understand tonight's limud, we actually need to see the fact that, first of all, our Gemara, Yud Tet Amud Bet says, Val Kislev mipnei Chanukah, Val Adar mipnei HaPura. So in Kislev, it's because of Chanukah. That makes sense. But also in Adar, on account of Purim. And we know that sometimes there are 2 Adars. So which Adar was being referenced here is the basic issue of the Gemara, and particularly if it was going to be 2 Adars. Today we already know well in advance. In the olden days, sometimes they also knew well in advance. Could be in Chodesh Shvat that they announced when Adar will come, there'll be 2 of them. If that was the case, very easy. The Shlichim are going to go out for an earlier month, and they're just going to say, "Oh, there's 2 of them." They'll go out for Chodesh Adar, and they'll say, "Oh, by the way, after you observe Purim, there's going to be another Adar afterward." Actually, more precisely, it's not what they would say. They would say the real Adar is Adar Sheni. So you're going to all observe Purim on the 2nd Adar, the Adar Hasamuch Nisan. This we learned from the Gemara in Megillah. It describes, there's a debate back and forth. The conclusion of the Gemara is that we always celebrate Purim in the Adar Hasamuch Nisan. Why? To connect Geula and Geula, the Geula of Purim, the Geula of Pesach. And it's a season of Geula, as it were. The Gemara here wants to talk about a case where we did not have a run-up. It was not the case that in Chodesh, Tevet or Shvat, the Beit Din decided already, we're going to have to intercalate the year, make a Shnat, an Uber and Yor, means we have to add an extra month. They didn't know that at that time. When did they figure it out? Already in Chodesh Adar, after the Shlichim for Rosh Chodesh Adar left. They realized, this is just going to be the first of 2 Adars. It was too late to call them back. They'd already left. So by the time the Shlichim got to wherever they were going, people thought, this is Adar. Okay, we now know that Shvat had 29 or 30 days, depending. Remember, every month is 29 days, and day 30 equals Aleph of the next month. Or a month has 30 days, and day 31 equals day 1 of the next month. Too late to call back the Shlichim, because they didn't have cell phones in those days. They're probably usser. That's why their cell phones were usser. The internet was usser, so they couldn't use them. So the Shlichim would get to where they were going. Nobody knew. They did Purim. And then, at the end of the month, another group of Shlichim, at the beginning of another month, in other words, another group of Shlichim show up and they tell them, it's not Nisan now, it's actually Adar Sheni. Okay? So in that case, that's what the Gemara here is talking about when it mentions V'ilu nit abra hashana yotzin af al Adar Sheni mipnei hapurim. Yeah? And yet, we don't have that in our Mishnah. The Mishnah just said, in Adar, because of Purim. So it didn't mention Adar Sheni or anything like that. Yeah. And it sort of begs the question, what does that mean? If you look in Rashi, he has a little bit of a different girsa than what we have in the Gemara in our Vilna Shas. V'im ve'elu im nitabra hashana la'achar shenichnas Adar harishon v'achu shlichim yashvu beitin v'inu v'iberuha lasut Adar hasheni acharze. So then they decided afterward, right? But those words, and if there would be a Shnat Ibur that was determined in the month of Adar, and we're going to send out the emissaries to in Adar Sheni to tell everyone it's Adar Sheni. What happened was they would be getting ready for Pesach, and the far reaches of the empire, if you will, farther away from Yerushalayim. The Shlichim would come on the 10th of the 11th and say, "Oh, did you bring matzah? No, that's going to be in a month from now. You got to realize it's Adar right now." So we already did Purim last month. That's not mentioned in the Mishnah, and it mentions Ve'ilu nitabra Hashan of Yotzin Afal Adar Sheni Purim Lo Katane, right? Lo Katane Matnitin, right? The Lo Rabbi, but this is not like Rabbi's opinion. What does Rabbi hold? The Tanya Rabbi Omer Im nitabra Hashana Yotzin Afal Adar Hasheni Mipnei HaPurim, because there's a statement of Rabbi that Rabbi holds. We have a brighter like this where he says that if it's a Shnat Ibur, so then they're going to go out even on the second Adar. So the Gemara explains. Here's what the argument is really about who added into the Mishnah this clause and who left it out. The Mishnah here leaves it out. Yeah? Demar Savar, Kol Mitzvah Noagot B'Sheni, Noagot B'Rishon. The first opinion holds that any of the mitzvot that you did in the first Adar, right? That you would be knowing in the second, you were already knowing in the first. If you look at Rashi, right? Rashi points out, Noah got Parishon, v'yatzi de chovatim v'purim sh'atza Parishon. When the Shlichim come and they say, it was already Purim last month, we thought. No, actually it's coming up. According to the first opinion, the opinion of the Tanakama, no need for them to do Purim again, because they did it already in what they thought was the original Adar. The second opinion, Mar Savar, that's Rabbi, no, according to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, they had to send out the Shlichim in Adar Sheni in order to tell them you don't have to do Pesach now, you don't have to do Pesach, it's in a month from now, but rather tell them you have to do Purim again. Either they did Purim before, turns out now if there's two Purims, you have to do Purim a second time, Purim Sheni, if you will, from earlier with Pesach Sheni, Purim Sheni. Now
Purim Katan. We say it now.
Purim Katan we hold is the first month of right. Because now we have a set date, a set calendar, and therefore we have like a vestige, like a phantom day called Purim Katan, which is the day of the 14th of Adar Aleph, Shushan Purim Katan, Adar Aleph 15 of the month, and then in Adar Bet, that's when we have Purim 14th and 15th. Go ahead, please, Judah.
What clue do they have, the Sanhedrin, that they should double Adar? Apparently, they do it in the very last minute.
Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. What it depends on is, I'll give you the simplistic answer now. The question was, how did how does the Sanhedrin know? Oh, we have to intercalate the year, and why didn't they know earlier? And the short answer, and it's a very oversimplified answer, but it's the best I can do for now because it's too labyrinthine. It's when they assess that the seasons, in terms of the solar seasons, that's how seasons are determined, are no longer matched up with the tukufot, with the seasons based on the lunar cycle. The function of adding that month is to correct so that when you get to Pesach, Pesach will be in the Tekufa called Kufat Nisan, also known as Chodesh Aviv. The Torah calls it Chodesh Aviv. So think Lahavdol about another religion where they only have a lunar cycle. So their special month keeps going around around the world because they're losing every time between the lunar cycle and the solar cycle. There's a discrepancy about 11 days. About 11 days. In our system, we have the lunar is corrected for the solar calendar every few years, 7 times in 19 years. We have an extra month, so we're gaining back the 30 days that we've lost accretively over time. You follow? And that's why we're doing it, to make sure that Nisan will be Chodesh Aviv. Some years, presumably, they already could tell this was coming up when they were in Chodesh Tevet or maybe Shvat. But some years, it was already Adar when they realized this isn't working out. We have to recalibrate. So just that's the basic gist of it. We're going to add a full month to make it a leap year. The question that is not fully resolved, it's a machloket, the Rambam on one side, the Ritva on the other, is whether they already knew all the calculations but retained a certain ritual dimension on, or whether out of necessity they figured out how the calendar worked and then made up a calendar which they were Makadesh in perpetuity. The Rambam holds the former view, that it was always known to the Chacham, they always knew everything about Kiddush HaChodesh, but they understood there was a ritualistic dimension to it they had to hold to. And the Ritva, who thinks that it's really in a later time, as the exile is becoming worse and worse, they realize we can't keep going up Pivra'iyah, and therefore they come up with a calendrical system because they're brilliant, they could figure things out and whatnot, and they knew it. So there's a machloket about this. The truth is, on one level, you think, well, the Rambam, I like it much better, because it means the Chacham really did understand everything about the calendar already, and they just didn't want to use it because they had to go with the system al pi re'iyah. The Ritva's view, though, makes more sense to understanding how they could be in a pickle where they don't know till the last minute they have to add a chodesh, an extra chodesh adar. Follow? Now the jury's out; it's not really answerable. And as you weave your way through the shas, you may lean to one direction or the other, but it may depend on the sugya. This sugya seems more like the Ritva, like it was the last minute. It's Adar, now they discovered. Down to the discovered, what can we do? So as a result of that discovery, now they have to get the word out, but they did it so late in the game, the Shlichim for Adar already left. That they sent a second group for Adar Sheni to announce. You understand? And then the Gemara here.
Why wouldn't they have sent out a second group of Shlichim right away?
Because it's a great question. They could have sent the extra group right away, saying there'll be an extra month. And that'll be the next sugya after this one, which is, but how many days is Adar Aleph going to be? 29 or 30? Lamai nafkamina, when they're going to observe Purim. And then there's going to be a question. I'm sort of giving the preview. We'll come to it right now. We'll come to it, right?
Okay.
What about Nisan?
Right.
So was it like programmed X number of days, Lahavdil, 30 days has September, April, June, and November. So Lahavdil, but we sort of have that, right? Elul's always 29 days. Tishrei 30 days. Cheshvan Kislev actually sometimes oscillate, but in terms of 29, 30. But most of the months, Nisan's always going to be 1 day Rosh Chodesh. Iyar is always 2 days Rosh Chodesh. Sivan is 1 day Rosh Chodesh. Tammuz is 2 days Rosh Chodesh. Av is 1 day Rosh Chodesh. It alternates one and the other. Elul is 2 days Rosh Chodesh. It's set for us, right? So the question, okay, so Adar, now you added Adar Sheni. Is Adar Sheni 29? Is it 30 days? How many days is it? It's going to depend on a lot of different factors. Yeah, Adar Aleph, Adar Sheni. I know you have to go. Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, so the Gemara here, having said Umar Savar, Kol Mitzvah Noga B'Sheni Noga B'Rishon, that was the view, presumably of Rabbi. Namely, he had to send a second group in order to observe Purim a second time. The Gemara then says, look, the Kula Elam Mitzvah Noga B'Sheni Ein Noga B'Rishon. Actually, everyone, even Rabbi, really agrees. Actually, that not just Rabbi, but the other opinion also holds. Sorry. That even if you did Purim in Adar Aleph, if there's now going to be a surprise announcement of Adar Sheni, you have to do Purim again. The argument here is really about the Ibur Shana. That's really what they're arguing about. The Tanya Kama Ibur Shana. How much is the Ibur Shana? Okay.
They give Machzis a shekel?
No.
It's after.
No. In Rosh Chodesh Adar, they would start announcing about it. But as long as you gave it between Adar Aleph, if it wasn't Adar Aleph, and Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you were okay.
Okay.
They didn't have to give it a second time. They gave it, you gave it. The point is you had to give it before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's why Rosh Chodesh Adar Mashmiin al Hashkalin. They start announcing you should give the Shkalin.
So presumably it's in the second Adar is when you do it.
Except if they don't know, unless they don't
Adar.
know there's a second Adar. So everyone thinks only one Adar.
Right.
So they gave already an Adar Aleph.
Yeah.
Then they did Purim. Then comes Adar Sheni a few days in and tell them, get your costumes out again, something like that. It's going to be Purim again. Purim again? Purim again. Do you have to give Machzor shekel? Was the question? No, not again. Because you gave it. It's for the what's it called? The fiscal year ends Adar, end of Adar, and begins Aleph Nisan. So you don't have to do it again.
What was the function of Hillel Zaken? He set the calendar, I thought, wasn't it?
You're talking about someone called Hillel Hasheni, who lives later after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Right.
So
There's a discussion with Hillel Hasheni, someone named Shmuel, probably more Hillel Hasheni, but there's a discussion about that as well. That's not Hillel Zaken. The person you just mentioned now, Hillel, from Teach Me the Torah on One Foot, and Ein Anili Mili, that's Hillel Hazaken. Hillel Hazaken, Hillel and Shammai, they live before all this whole story. They live in the time period of 63 BCE when Pompey comes to the Holy Land. They're there. First century BC.
The second Hillel.
He's already a descendant of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He's the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi dies sometime in the early 200s CE. So it's after that. And then whether they enact it and it means they started using it and that was it, or do they have the system set and it wasn't set into motion formally till they had no choice because there was no longer a Sanhedrin Agadol that could still make things happen. There was a Sanhedrin Agadol even after after you Rabbi Yehuda Nasi kept going. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi at the end of the Mishnah, but there was still So the real argument is Kama Ibur Shana. So what is it? So the Tanakhama says Shloshim Yom. And Ibur Shana means you add an extra 30 days. Rishim Gamliel Omer Chodesh. You add a month. Maishna Shloshim Yadeh Chodesh Nami Yadeh. Now what is a Chodesh? Because you're probably wondering what's a Chodesh. Look at Rashi. Rashi Kama Ibur Shana Yemei Adar Harishon She'oto Osin Ibur Lashana. Remember, if you saw things coming in Shvat, in Tevet or in Shvat, then you would make the first Adar the extra Adar. The extra Adar is not Adar Bet, really, unless you're stuck. The extra Adar is really Adar Aleph. How do I know? Because the holiday of Purim is in the real Adar Sheni, right? That's the Adar, really. And the extra Adar is really the one called Adar Rishon. Now, why does this matter? So look in Rashi, okay, Noga Barishon. Kama Ibur Shana, Yemei Adar Harishon, She'oto Sin Ibur Lashana. That's where you made the intercalation of the year. Chodesh, Kasal Kadaitech Chaf Tet Yamin. Right? I mean, if someone asks you, calculate, I'll see you in a month from now. I think colloquially, most of us think of 30 days. Or we might think of 4 weeks, which is not 30 days.
Right.
So when Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, when people talk about a Chodesh, and it's a Chodesh Ha'ibur, what they must mean is 29 days. Meaning day 30 is already Rosh Chodesh of the next month, of Adar Sheni. And really, that's what they're arguing about. It's a difference of a day, but a day makes a big difference if it's Pesach, not Pesach, if it's Purim, not Purim, yeah? So, back into Gemara, yeah? The Gemara here says, Maishna Shloshim Diyadeh, Chodesh Nami Yadeh. I don't know, so you're going to tell me, well, they'll know about 30 days. They count up 30 days. They also know how to count 29 days. Amar Rav Papa, Mandamar Chodesh, Ratza Shloshim. No, because Rav Shimon Gamliel, who says that when it says the Chodesh Ha'ibur means they added other Aleph, means that every single time they would determine if that year, when they added 29 days, was it going to be 29 days added or 30 days added? Meaning, in other Aleph, even if in Chodesh Shvat or in Tevet and Shvat, they already sent it to Shlichim and they told everybody, oh, Adar this year is going to be 2 Adars. They still didn't know definitively whether the first Adar would be 29 days long or 30 days long. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Mishum Kahala Kadisha Yerushalayim Al Shnei Adarim Shemekachim Al Shnei Adarim Shemekachim Otam B'Yom Ibureyan L'Meimer the Chaserin of Dinan Malayin Law of Dinan. So Rabbi Shimon Levi testified on behalf of the holy community of Yerushalayim, Kahala Kadisha. So at Kahala Kadosha says they call it Kahala Kadisha Yerushalayim. Al Shnei Adarim Shemekachim Otam B'Yom Ibureyan. He testified from the people in Yerushalayim who said that they would always be Makadesh the Chodesh at the end of Adar on the day of the Ibur, meaning on the day of day 30. It was day 30 became day 1 of the next month. And it's Adarim, both. In other words, Adar Aleph would end after 29 days. Day 30 was already day 1 of Adar Sheni. And after 29 days of Adar Sheni, day 30 was really Aleph Nisan already. So if that's true, and that's testimony, counteracts what we said a moment ago, that according to Shimon Gamliel, it would oscillate year to year, right? Lafuki midadarish Rav Nachman Bar Chizda is against what Rav Nachman Bar Chizda darshaned, which is also quoting from the source. It doesn't give you the whole thing here, but Darish Rav Nachman Bar Chizda should actually be not midadarish, but rather according to the Masorah Shas here, did darish Rav Nachman Bar Chizda. He'id Rav Simai mishum Chagai Zechariah Malachi. This cannot be direct because I don't think Rav Simai was alive to meet Chagai Zechariah and Malachi, so it must mean it had a Masorah from them, the last 3 of the prophets. Al Shnei Adarim, She'im Ratzal Asotin Shneim Mileim Osin, Shneim Chaserim Osin, Echad Mali V'Echad Chaser Osin. It was up for grabs every year.
They don't argue.
V'kach hayu noagin bagola, and that's what they would do in Chutz La'aretz, meaning they would have to wait for Shlichim, they have to wait for the answer. When Mishum Rabbeinu Amru, and the name of Rabbeinu here means Rav, really. La'olam Echad Malei V'Echad Chaser. One of them, Adar Aleph, presumably, would always be Malei. 30 days, day 31 was Adar Sheni, and the end of Adar Sheni was 29 days, and day 30 was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Ad Shivad Lecha, Suba Rosh Chodesh Bismano, Shachle Lamar Ukva, other Samach Lenisan, La'olam Chaser. So, the whole idea here that I have another testimony that says that other Samach Lenisan is always going to be 29 days. So Mativ Rav Nachman asked the following question. And the following question, to understand it, you have to remember, this is sort of a good methodological point for us in our learning. I'll pause here for a minute. Mishnayot are working on a certain level, a solid surface level in the Yamshel Talmud. And when you dive a little deeper, that's the Gemara. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper. But the Gemara always presupposes that you already covered the whole surface and you know it off by heart and you're familiar with it. We're not always all familiar with it, but if you turn with me to 21b, there's a Mishnah at the top of 21b that is the next piece of this Gemara. The Mishnah 21b, not to confuse you, but it's literally the next sentence after the Mishnah that appeared on 18a. Right? Right? You understand? Okay. So when you get to 21b, the next Mishnah is Al Shnei Chodashim Chalin Al Shabbat, Al Nisan V'Al Tishrei. We'd even be Machal Shabbos to send out if Rosh Chodesh fell out on Shabbos, we send the Shlichim out. Shebahen Shluchin Yotzin LeSuria. Maybe there's Chayalim in Syria. They have to hear. So there's an army base up there. Tzahals could be there. You never know. Well, if I said this last year in a shir, it'd be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, Rabbi. But it's actually now. So, and that's how they would fix the holidays. And when the Beit Mikdash was standing, they would send the people out, the Shlichim, out, even if it was Shabbos, for any of the months, not only the month of Nisan and Tishrei. Why? Because they have to fix the korban to make sure they give the right korban on the right day, i.e., that these are the people who are going to have to go to the Beit Din, right? Sorry, I made a mistake. These are not the Shlichim leaving the Beit Din. These are the people who have to get to the Beit Din. Sorry, to testify on the day of. That's what sorry, right? Okay, so on Nisan and Tishrei, because you want to get it right, because they're very significant months. But it turns out when the Beit Mikdash was standing, you want the right korban on the right day, means you have to do Rosh Chodesh Musaf korban on the korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh on that day. How you can do that? Shlichim have to, when I say Shlichim, means the Eidim really. They see, they get on horseback, and they ride right away to Yerushalayim. Larry, question?
What is the reason why Adar Sheni is the real Adar?
Megillah, Daf Tet. We're the one closer to Nisan because the Geula of Nisan should be connected. So the Geula of Adar should be connected to the Geula of Nisan. So that's why we consider it. It's a discussion, Masechet Megillah. That's a conclusion essentially. That's why it wins. Yeah. Okay. So now go back. Now you're understanding this that they could be Machal Shabbos to get to Yerushalayim, Nisan Tishrei, and with the Beis Mikdash standing any month. Go to the Gemara now and Yud Zayin. Yud Tet bed. I flipped back too far. Right? And you have here Mativ Rav Nachman, 4 lines up from the bottom on 19b. Mativ Rav Nachman. Al Shnei Chodashim Chalad Shabbat. Al Nisan Val Tishrei. Iyamart Bishlama Zimnin Male Zimnin Chaser Mishim Hachim Chalalina. If you hold that sometimes it would be 29, sometimes of 30, sometimes it would be 29. So that's why the people who saw the Edom who saw the moon, in Otniel or in Beit El, they had to get to Yerushalayim. Why they would have to go on a Shabbos? Because you don't know what it's going to be that month, and therefore the seeing it is very significant. Ella, top of the next page. If you're going to say it's always the case that Adar Sheni is always chaser, it's always only 29 days, who cares if the Edom see it or they don't see it, right? Why are you making a chilul happen? The Gemara answers, Mishum de mitzvah l'kadesh al hariyah. Even though it was already, in other words, there's no calendar that's fixed for everything, alternating month. But if there was some kind of a tradition, and they're debating it now, that really Adar Sheni was always 29 days, so if the Edom arrive, they don't arrive, the Beit Din is still going to announce day 30 equals day 1 of Nisan, because maybe that's the rule. No, but you see there was a Mishnah that said, for Chodesh Nisan, we allow people to be Mechal Shabbos and to show up on Shabbos traveling to Yerushalayim. Why? And the answer is because we want to make sure that the Kiddush could happen al pi re'iyah.
Which supports the Rambam's position.
I mean, maybe, but the Rambam,
Why maybe?
because the idea is like this. Maybe the Ritva is right. Maybe they don't really have a calendar set, and they really are dependent on the Kiddush al pi re'iyah. But they have a rule. They have a few rules. They have a minhag, and nice, good reference, right? But one of the rules that they have is, no matter what, Adar Sheni, if there are two Adars, can only be 29 days long. So now, in a regular year, when it falls out on a Tuesday, so the witnesses will come, and we hope they'll come in time. And if they do, which we hope they do, so we'll declare the next day, 30, is really going to be Aleph Nisan. What if the witnesses don't come? They don't come. So if we say, well, the rule will triumph, so the rule will overtake. Just say, okay, even the witnesses didn't come, still the next day is Aleph Nisan. But when it's butting up against Shabbos, we are not going to violate Shabbos over this issue, because after all, this happened on a Tuesday. The next day, we would just say is Aleph Nisan no matter what. So if it's Shabbos, then how could you allow somebody to be B'chal Shabbos on something that's already a hard and fast rule? It's going to be the Rosh Chodesh anyway. But you see the Mishnah said they should be B'chal Shabbos. Must be that they're not sure which day it is. They don't have such a rule. It could be 29, or it could be 30. But the Gemara says, no. It could be that they really did have the rule, but there was an Inyan Davkas to be Makadesh al pi re'iyah. It doesn't have to mean they had the whole calendar already set from Allah Moshe Sinai and it's all just going, but they don't follow it. It could be they only had like one little rule. Follow the logic? In other words, the debate on the floor being debated here in the discussion of the Chachamim is, was there a rule about the end of Adar or not? But you see from the Mishnah on the next 2 pages later, 21b, clearly the answer is no, because if the answer was yes, you would never be Machal Shabbos if there was a rule that so they didn't get the ceremony. No, the Gemara says there was ceremony is so important because the mitzvah is Kazer Eva Kadesh, a specific mitzvah. It overrides Shabbos because we want to make sure it's still going to be Kiddush al pi re'iyah. You follow what's going on? I want to fill in some of the rods before you say goodbye. Yep.
Explain that again, no pun intended. What is the Chiddush with regards to the fact that we know that Elul is 29 days,
right?
So it says it's a month. It says it's a chodesh. Okay?
We don't know that Elul is 29 days.
How do we not know?
We know it now because we set the calendar. Okay, but here we're talking about Adar to Nisan. Let's stick with Adar to Nisan.
Okay. So
and the question is, do we know that for a fact? The Gemara is asking, do we know for a fact that it's 29 days? Do we know for a fact that it's 30 days? And the answer is, well, we're not sure, because there are people who argue otherwise. They argue sometimes the Adars ended after 30 days, sometimes ended after 29 days. It's not a rule. Is it a rule or not a rule? So the Gemara says, well, I could prove to you that it must be a rule. It must not have been a rule, because you see that on Shabbos they could have people traveling on Shabbos just during the Kiddush al pi re'iyah happened, because clearly they didn't know when it was going to be. They didn't want to miss Rosh Chodesh. But the Gemara says, yeah, but maybe the whole thing and ultimately was ceremonial. They wanted to make sure to have Kiddush al pi re'iyah. So therefore, for that reason, even though they really did have the rule, but maybe they still insisted, no matter what, the Edom have to come and ratify it. for it
They
to be
didn't know
official.
where to-
It was procedural.
Procedural.
Right? And we're kind of debating this back and forth. You look in Rashi. Rashi here, look at Rashi with me because it's a little complicated. Rashi, Mishum Rabbeinu, Rashi is Rav. Yeah? No, go back. Sorry, I started too late. Sorry. We got to go way back. Where are we here? I'm much higher up. You look at Chodesh, we said, Kasaka Daita Chavtet Yamim, 29 days. Maishna Lamanda Amar Shloshim, Dein Tzarech Lachzor, V'lishloach Shluchim, Ayom Kiddush Adar Hasheni, Diyade, B'nei HaGolet, Shalom Adar Harishon Me'ubar, Uvayom, Lamed Aleph Dit Kadesh. Right? What is the difference between the people who said that they know? If everybody knows that there's a fixed number of days in Adar Aleph, and it's always 30, then you don't need Shlichim to go for Adar Sheni, because if there is an Adar Sheni, it's automatically going to be after 30 days of Adar Rishon. Lamanda Amar Chodesh Nami, right? Ein Tzarech Lahodia. They will hold a Chodesh also. They have a Yadid La'olam Chaser. Of Yom Shloshim Nitkadesh. If they think Chodesh means 29 days, so they'll know it's 29 days after the beginning of Adar Aleph. Count 29 days. Day 30 is Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. But the Gemara had said after that, no, Ratzu Chodesh, Ratzu Shloshim. The reason why this is machloket, it's a little bit like, how do people talk? With the example I just gave now, is a month 30 days or is a month 4 weeks, which is 28 days. So Ratzu Chodesh, Ratzu Shloshim. Lefichach Tzrichim Lehodia Imasu Mali Ochasir, goes back and forth. And then the Rashi explains Shemakachin Oten B'Yom Iburein, meaning Yom Shloshim, the 30th day, Kari Yom Ibur. It's called the day of Ibur, like pregnancy. She'oto osin ibur lachodesh. Shema abrin oto. Shema kachim yom shloshim al shneim shel shneim rosh chodesh nichnas. Yom lamed la'adar harishon u rosh chodesh la'adar hasheni. Yom lamed shel adar hasheni rosh chodesh Nisan. Yeah. In other words,
Right.
we take the 30th day each time we make it the beginning of the next month. That would be shema kachim otem b'yom ibureim. Remember the chasirin avdinan b'nichuta. Meaning it wasn't a question, but it's a statement. Echad mali v'echad chaser, davka ka'amar, rishon mali v'sheni chaser. That was the debate. Maybe it's rishon is always 30 days plus 1, and sheni is 29 days plus 1, meaning the next day is the first day of the new month. Mishum Rabbeinu, that's Rav. Shok v'rosh chodesh bizmano. Ad she'amru l'cha habayim me'eretz Yisrael, kadshu beitin rosh chodesh adar hasheni v'yom shloshim la'adar rishon v'asad rishon chaser. Right? So until you heard it from those who came from Eretz Yisrael to tell you, oh, yeah, we'll tell you how many days was in the last month, kind of thing, you know, and when did the Kiddush HaChodesh when it happened? Mechaled Shabbat, he fills in the mission that we already saw. Edim Shro et Levana b'chidusha Mechaled Shabbat latzed chutz latchum lavol beitin la'id lifneim. They go outside of the tchum even to get to the beitin to announce to them, to testify to them. Lefishim mo'adin kulan tluyin b'shnei chodashim alalu. All the holidays are set based on what's going to happen in these months, because when it's Nisan means when it's Pesach, when it's Shavuot, so a lot of things. Because Salka Daita Chilula the Shar Rachman Mishum the Kviat Yarcha. It would seem we're of the opinion, at least at this point of the Gemara, the Chilul of Yom Tov is of Shabbos rather is permissible in order to set the moon time. Levana, who imale male im chaser chaser, whether it's male or chaser, to give that report. Mishum hachim chalalim. Im ra'u b'yom shloshim, she'im lo ba'ov yi'idu she'ra'u hashlayom, lo yigatshu beiti ad macha v'yatzur d'chaser malay, right? If the Adam don't show up on day 30, then automatically day 31 becomes the new month, even if the Adam never come. So, nothing you can do. Yeah, the month cannot go more than 30 days. No month as long as 30 days. No, day 31, day 32, day 33. After day 30, the next day is going to be Rosh Chodesh no matter what. But if they come, so yeah. Right? So if you say that really it's going to be chaser, it's supposed to be chaser all the time. So why do you want to be why do we let them be Mechal Shabbos, the Adam ever to come? So we say the mitzvah l'kadosh al re'iyah, Rashi al re'iyah, al pi Adam dichtiv, hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodeshim, kazeh re'eh v'kadesh. Right? Like this. We darshan that in the drashas, kazeh means, and Rashi actually describes this, and the Medrash describes, Nitkasha Moshe know what the Levana looked like, so kazeh re'eh v'kadesh, Hashem showed him the shape. But kazeh re'eh v'kadesh, halachically, also means like this, see it and then sanctify it, as opposed to just having a calendar that you're relying upon, which still doesn't answer the question, but did they have a calendar? Rambam says, yeah. Rotva says no. So the Gemara here continues, line 3. Igid Amar Amar of Nachman, I also learned Al Shnei Chodashim Chalei Shabbat. Some learn it that really Rav Nachman didn't ask this as a challenge to the idea of the question of whether it's one day or the other, but really not to affirm that that's the case. So Iked Amr Rav Nachman Af Ananami Tanena Al Shnei Chodashim on the 4th line of the Gemara in 28. Mechalei Shabbat Al Nisan Bal Tishrei. If you say it's always going to be chaser the months. So mishum hachim chalinan the mitzvah kadosh al re'iyah. So for that you're going to machal Shabbos, because you want to make sure you're going to do kiddush al pi re'iyah, but you already know when it's going to be. But if it's not a hard and fast rule, if sometimes it's going to be 29 days, some years it's going to be 30 days. So now it falls out on Shabbos. Why don't we just? What can we do? We're stuck. Day 30 came out on a Shabbos. So instead of letting the witnesses be Machal Shabbos go through the Tchum and show up on that Shabbos, we have the option. This year, what can we do? We'll exercise the option and it'll be the next day. Or to sort of prove the fact that we don't say that seems to imply that what? That really they are relying on some kind of an idea. Yeah. So so hachinami, sorry. If the 30th day fell on Shabbos, that would be true. But rather, hacha b'mayaskina. This is what we're really talking about in this case, where we're letting the people come on Shabbos. That the issue is the 31st day came on Shabbos. In other words, day 30 was Friday, no witnesses came. Now it's day 31, and like we said, day 31 automatically is going to be day 1. But if there's a way to still be Mekadas Al Pi Hariyah, we'll allow the Edom to come even on Shabbos.
Okay.
Follow?
No.
The Gemara ended up saying that what really must be going on here is the case of the Mishnah on 21b, where we allow witnesses to violate Shabbos and go through the Tchum, outside of the Tchum to come to Yerushalayim, must be on a day when there's no longer an option for the beiting to add an extra day. They must be Mekadosh the Chodesh on that day. They're stuck because it's already day, quote unquote, 31.
So why would we be Machal Shabbos?
Because we're still trying to aspire to Kazeh Re'eh V'Kadesh, a mitzvah say that supersedes the issues of Shabbos, even to have it on the day of. If the 30, they'll say it the other way, or they said it through the flow of the Gemara. If day 30 is Shabbos, so we'll say, you know what? Tell the Adim, because they're counting, they know the days of the month. Everyone knows the 15th, 17th, 24th, 25th, 26th. So they get now to the 29th day, becomes the 30th day, and the 30th day is Shabbos. So maybe there's no dispensation really for the Adim to come on the 30th day, because really, instead of breaking Shabbos, they could just easily come the next day, day 31, which is Sunday, and that'll be all of the next month. And no one had to break Shabbos over it. But the Mishnah said that they do go in Nisan and in Tishrei, even if it's on a Shabbos. How so? That if there could be either 29 days or 30 days for the month. So that month, it'll be the next day will be Rosh Chodesh Sunday, and no one has to break Shabbos. What must the case be where the Mishnah is declaring, they should break Shabbos on this day, the last possible day, which is really the new month, where it's just literally a ceremonial thing, because even if they didn't see the moon at all, they're still going to call that day as Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara says here, basically concluding that in this case, if it really was the 31st day, quote unquote, there's no such thing, but the 31st day of the month was a Shabbos, and the witnesses could have come Friday, but they didn't. So this day, of course, the Beit Din is going to declare it Aleph Nisan or Aleph Tishrei, but the witnesses, we still want them to come because Kazera Eva Kadesh to kind the mitzvah. So Mati Rav Kahana didn't like this. Rav Kahana said, wait a second, look at the rest of that Mishnah. Kshamikdash Kayim, Mechayin Afal Kulan, B'gnei Tanakanda Korban. Yeah? It says that the reason when there was a Beit HaMikdash, why we would allow the Eidim to come on a Shabbos, B'machal Shabbos, was for the purpose of the right Korban. Nothing to do with Yom Tov, had to do with the day of Rosh Chodesh, the special Korban. It was not related to what? It's not related to Kiddush HaChodesh. Midikulu lav mishum de mitzvah l'kadosh ala re'iyah. Nisan v'tishrei nami lav mishum mitzvah l'kadosh ala re'iyah. If the second part of the Mishnah says that when the Beit HaMikdash stood, the reason why we allowed the witnesses to come was not because we want to make sure that if the 31st day of a month is on a Shabbos, that we still want the ceremonial, I'm calling it ceremonial, it's the mitzvah of Kazer Eva Kadesh Al Pi Edim, but rather it's said it's because of Takana Korbanot. It must be that for Nisan and for Tishrei, whatever the reason is, those 2 months remain even when there's no Beit HaMikdash. It can't be because of the mitzvah of Kiddush HaPeiriyah. If that was true, the reason in the Reisha would have been the reason in the Seifa. In the Seifa, I gave you a reason. Didn't tell you the reason in the Reisha. That's why it's up for grabs. In the Seifa, the reason was Mipnei Takana Korbanot. In the Reisha, Nisan, Tishrei, that's when there's no Beit HaMikdash standing. Didn't say. If you hold that sometimes it's Malay, sometimes it's Chaser, then if the Eidim really saw it on a Shabbos, so they're going to be Mechal Shabbos to get it because that's the day they saw it, they testify. But if you say it's always, there's like a rule written on the wall or in the rule book that the end of the month of Adar is always going to be 29 days. So what do we need them to come for? That's not really determinative of anything. Tiyufta. The Gemara says that is a good knockdown question. And it must be, therefore, that it's Zimnin Malay, Zimnin Chaser. Sometimes it was Malay, sometimes it was Chaser, the months of Adar. There wasn't a hard and fast rule. And therefore, they did have to have witnesses come, even if it was Shabbos, Tishrei, and Nisan, because all of the holidays that are connected to those two Rosh Chodeshes, right? If you think about it, Pesach and Shavuot are tethered to each other, and then Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot tethered to each other. Remember we saw in the last Gemara, maybe you're sunk for Tishrei because you did Rosh Hashanah, maybe not exactly on the right day. Too bad, but at least you get into Takana Moed, or at least you get in Yom Kippur and Sukkot on the right day. And that's what the Gemara, that's what we learned last week. And the Gemara said, yeah, but from the days of Ezra and Sofer, it never happened that this was a problem. Right?
But with Atbash, you should be able to figure out once you hit one of these holidays, you're not going to be confused. It's going to be on Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi. If it's tied.
So the Atbash code is a question which if people don't know what that is, I'm going to get into it right now, but we'll talk about it after because we've got to finish already. But the Atbash code is exactly Hihi Inyan. It's like the question is mathematics discovered or invented? Is the Atbash code a siman that the Rambam's right, that there really was a calendar, everybody knew, and that it was obviously fixed, and that you already knew that the first night of Pesach was going to be that, and Bet was going to be Shin, and Bet was going to be the night of Shavuos, etc. Or no, ex post facto, they discovered, i.e., really they invented. Oh, look at that! It works out so nicely, right? Because some of them don't exactly match up with the letters. You can see it's a little bit forced. Like At matches, Bash works, Gar matches, but when you start getting to the later ones, it's less clear that they exactly line up. You start a little bit like this and like that to match up the letter of the night of Pesach with the actual Yom Tov, Akmal, what that is. But we'll leave it for now. Okay, no more time tonight. It's 45 minutes of Shira. It's quite a lot now that we're at 40 minutes after the hour. It's refuted, and we're saying that it could be early, could be Malay, could be Chaser. That's how the Gemara concludes. That's what we'll conclude for tonight. Ad